paradrama tales.
She looked me dead in the eye and said, "Only real single moms get the struggle." But her son's dad pays support, takes him to the doctor, picks him up from school. So I asked, is he really absent or just not performative enough for Instagram? And everything went quiet. There are a few phrases that get so overused, they start to mean everything, which means eventually they mean nothing, and single mom is starting to become one of them. We used to know what it meant. It meant the other parent was gone, not helping, not calling, not sending a check. It meant you were doing pickups, drop-offs, fevers, bills, nightmares, and birthdays, alone. But lately, the definition feels slippery. It's stretched so far, it now includes moms who split custody 50-50. Moms who get full weekends off. Moms whose exes show up with Target bags and hugs and apologies, but still get painted out of the picture because they don't post enough smiling selfies with their kid. And look, I get it. Motherhood is hard, even with help, and emotional labor is invisible, and it's exhausting. And yes, sometimes you feel like you're doing it alone even when technically you're not. But we can't keep confusing feeling overwhelmed with being unsupported. When you start calling every struggle single mom struggle, you blur the lines between someone who's doing the work mostly alone and someone who's just not getting the exact kind of support they want. And when that happens, you make it harder to see and support the women who are truly on their own, the ones who don't get child support, the ones who never get a weekend off, the ones whose co-parents vanished without a trace, or worse, left wreckage behind. We should be allowed to talk about those distinctions, not to compete, not to shame, but to be accurate. Because when every story gets called the same, no story stands out. And maybe that's the point no one wants to touch, that sometimes we use titles like single mom not to describe our situation, but to validate our struggle, to shield ourselves from critique, to be heard, instantly, unquestionably. But if we want real support, as women, as mothers, then we have to tell the truth about what we're actually carrying and what we're not. Not to minimize our pain, but to respect the weight of those who truly carry it alone. Let me paint the picture, not from judgment, just from observation. Her son goes to the same school as my daughter. I've seen his dad at pickup. He waits in the car with a book on his lap, sometimes steps out and ties the kid's shoes, brings snacks. He shows up for parent-teacher nights. He's not loud about it. He's just there. She once told me he gives her money every 2 weeks, like clockwork. She doesn't have to chase him for it. He even covers extra when the kid needs new cleats or outgrows his winter coat. And on days when the kid is sick, it's not unusual for him to take the day off work and stay home. She complains that he lets the boy eat too much sugar, but she also admits he's the one who remembers the inhaler. But somehow, all of that fades when she tells the story. He becomes emotionally unavailable, unengaged. She says, if he really cared, he'd post about his son more. People wouldn't even know he has a kid. That's the yardstick, apparently. Instagram stories. And I sit there wondering, since when did parenting become a performance? Since when did showing up in real life count for less than showing up online? What she's really saying, though I doubt she realizes it, is that she wants proof, not just to feel supported, but to be seen as the one who's doing it all. Because that's become part of her identity now. The single mom who survives, the warrior, but warriors fight alone. And in truth, she's not alone. She just doesn't feel celebrated. And look, I'm not here to downplay the mental load, the loneliness, the days that feel like running a marathon on one leg. Even with help, motherhood is brutal sometimes. I know that. I live that. But I also know what it looks like when someone has no help at all. And that's not her story. Her story is of someone raising a child in parallel with another adult. Maybe not her ideal co-parent, maybe not expressive or poetic, but present, contributing, not gone. And that matters. Because if we blur every story into one version, the I do it all anthem, we start treating truth like a threat. But truth isn't a threat, it's a boundary. And sometimes the most loving thing we can do for someone is hold up a mirror they've been too exhausted to look into. There's a thing we do these days, quietly, subtly, that no one really talks about. We inflate our struggle, not always on purpose, not with malice, but in the way we describe things, in the stories we tell, in the labels we cling to a little too tightly. Because in this world, pain gets you credibility. Tiredness is a badge. Exhaustion is currency. The more overwhelmed you are, the more real you must be. So we add a little weight to the truth. We call parenting solo when it's actually shared. We say we do it all, even when someone else is doing part of it, just not the way we'd prefer. We're not lying exactly. We're just curating the hard parts, magnifying the invisible work, and quieting the support that doesn't fit the narrative. It's struggle inflation. And like all inflation, it devalues the real thing. Because while some are dramatizing the presence of difficulty, others are quietly drowning in it. Moms who haven't had a day off in years, who miss meals so their kids can eat, who do pickups, pay bills, wipe tears, and fight legal battles, all alone. And here's the thing that stings. When we all claim the same level of hardship, we flatten the landscape. And in that flattening, the ones truly carrying the heaviest weight disappear. I've seen it happen. I've sat at tables where someone declared, "I'm a single mom too," and across the room, a woman who actually is, who hasn't heard from her ex in years, just quietly looked down at her plate. Because when everyone's in crisis, no one gets support, only applause. And I get it. Being a mom can feel thankless. Sometimes all we want is for someone to say, "You're doing great." But if we need validation so badly that we exaggerate the terms of our own story, we're not asking to be seen. We're asking to be pitied. And pity is not respect. Respect comes from honesty, from saying, "I'm tired, but I'm not alone. I'm struggling, but I have help." And if that feels like not enough to say out loud, maybe we need to stop measuring worth by how broken we sound. Maybe strength isn't always in surviving the worst, but in telling the truth, even when it's less impressive. It was supposed to be a light afternoon, family lunch, plastic forks, store-bought cupcakes, cousins yelling over whose turn it was on the switch. And then she said it. Right between bites of potato salad and someone asking for more iced tea, he looked across the table, smiled that tight smile she does when she's gearing up for a speech, and said, "Only real single moms get the struggle." And for a second, I didn't even flinch. I've heard her say variations of that before, in passing, in stories, on Instagram captions with sad music underneath. But that day, something about it stuck. Because it wasn't just a throwaway comment anymore. It was a line drawn in the middle of the table. On one side, her, the real one. On the other, me, the one who supposedly couldn't understand. So I said gently, "But your kid's dad is very much in the picture, though." And that was it. That was the moment. She went quiet. Not thoughtful quiet. Cold quiet. Like I'd just exposed something that wasn't supposed to be touched. Like I had crossed her line, just by describing what was true. The conversation shifted quickly after that. Someone asked for more napkins. Someone changed the subject. But I could feel it. The tension humming just beneath the paper plates. Later that night, she texted me. "You invalidated my experience. You don't understand trauma." And I sat with that for a long time. Because I don't want to be the person who dismisses someone's pain. That's not who I am. That's not the sisterhood I believe in. But is it invalidation to point out that someone isn't actually alone when they're claiming to be? Is it cruelty to name the difference between feeling unsupported and being unsupported? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't mock her. I asked a question. And the question was, is this label still true, or has it just become convenient? Because words matter, especially the ones we wear as armor, especially the ones we use to claim space. And if a single sentence, spoken softly, can cause this much fallout, maybe the problem isn't the sentence. Maybe it's what the sentence revealed. Sometimes the most disruptive thing you can do in a family is say something honest, in a room that's grown too comfortable with the version that sounds better. There's a line people keep confusing these days, and I think that confusion is breaking more relationships than any harsh word ever could. It's the line between critique and invalidation. Critique says, "I hear you, but I have a different angle." Invalidation says, "What you feel doesn't matter." They are not the same. But when emotions run high and identities feel wrapped in what we believe we've survived, any disagreement starts to sound like a threat. That's what happened with her. To her, my sentence, "But he's still in the picture though," wasn't just commentary. It was betrayal, like I had erased her story, like I was siding with the man who broke her expectations. But I wasn't trying to pick a side. I was pointing out a fact, one I thought we both understood, that being a mother is hard, that being co-parents is hard. But calling yourself a single mom when you aren't one, not in the truest sense, might be doing more harm than good. And I get it. We live in a world where mothers, especially those doing it mostly alone, are finally being recognized, celebrated, given a platform to say, "This is hard and I'm doing it anyway." That spotlight matters. But when everyone steps into that spotlight, even those who aren't living in the same kind of shadow, it dilutes the meaning. It makes it harder to see who actually needs the most help, who's slipping through the cracks, quietly, because they didn't put on the warrior armor loud enough. That's why I spoke up, not to attack, but to protect the truth, to honor the women who really are carrying everything, the emotional labor, the financial stress, the doctor's visits, the discipline, the hugs, the night feedings, without a second pair of hands anywhere. When we say all experiences are the same, we flatten real pain. We turn every critique into cruelty. And suddenly, there's no room for honest conversation. But honesty is not an act of violence. And pushing back, gently, respectfully, isn't betrayal. It's how we grow. It's how we stay grounded in what's real. And it's how we learn to support each other, not just with sympathy, but with precision. Because empathy without truth, that's just performance. There's a funny thing that happens when you wear a label long enough, it starts to wear you back. I think that's what happened to her. Somewhere along the way, single mom stopped being just a description of her situation and started becoming her armor. It was how she introduced herself at mom's groups, how she captioned her selfies, how she justified the distance between her and everyone else in the family, and maybe how she processed the disappointment of how things turned out with him. Because once something becomes your identity, it also becomes your defense. Question it, even slightly, and suddenly you're not just offering perspective. You're attacking who they are. It doesn't matter if the facts are soft. It doesn't matter if your tone is kind. The moment you suggest, the situation isn't as black and white as they need it to be, they retreat behind the shield. You don't understand trauma. You're judging me. You're trying to erase my experience. But I wasn't trying to erase anything. I was trying to ask, when the facts shift, when support shows up, when your reality changes, can your identity grow with it? Or are you still gripping the pain because it's the only thing that's made people clap? See, here's the problem with armor. It protects you, yes, but it also isolates you. It keeps out criticism, sure, but it also keeps out intimacy, out truth, out real healing. And over time, it becomes hard to know the difference between who you are and what you've had to survive. That's where she's stuck, in a version of herself where the struggle is permanent, and any light that sneaks in feels like a threat, not a blessing. But when we use identity as a shield, we stop letting ourselves evolve. We stop letting other people meet us honestly. We stop letting go of stories that no longer fit, because we're too afraid that without the hardship, no one will see us anymore. But you can tell the truth about your situation without losing the strength you've built in the process. You can step out of the costume and still be respected for what you went through. Because real power isn't in the label, it's in what you survived before you ever needed one. I sat with it longer than I'd like to admit. Not her silence, not her text, but the echo that came after. Maybe I said too much. Maybe I should have just nodded and let it go. Because that's what we're taught, right? That kindness means quiet. That being a good woman means smoothing the edges, swallowing the truth, smiling through the tension. But I've done that before. I've bitten my tongue until it bled. Let someone's narrative take up space because it was easier than risking discomfort. And every time I did, a little piece of me, the honest piece, faded further into the background. So this time, I said something. And it wasn't cruel, it wasn't loud, it wasn't designed to humiliate or embarrass. It was just clear. But he's still in the picture, though. That's it. 7 words. Not a declaration, not a judgment, just a fact. But somehow, facts hurt more than insults these days, especially when they cut across a story someone's built their worth on. Still, I've come to believe this. You're not a villain for being honest. You're not mean because you name what you see. You're not heartless because you don't automatically validate everything someone says just because they say it with emotion. We confuse empathy with agreement too often. We think love means never challenging, but love, real, grounded, respectful love, includes truth, even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's earned. And I love my cousin. I admire her strength. But I also believe that truth shouldn't be seen as betrayal, not in families, not in friendships, not between women. Because when we walk around constantly terrified of being too harsh, we stop being real. We start performing. And the people around us lose the chance to grow because we were too scared to hold up the mirror. So, no, I don't regret what I said. Not because it felt good, but because it was necessary. Clarity isn't cruelty. And speaking up, softly and cleanly, doesn't make you the villain. It just makes you someone who finally stopped asking for permission to see things as they are. Let's talk about the women who don't get to log off their motherhood at night, the ones who fill out every school form alone, who write both their own name and emergency contact in the same shaky pen, who hold their child's hands through fevers and parent-teacher meetings and birthday parties where no one else shows up, not even the other parent. They don't get weekend rotations. They don't get someone Venmoing half the dance class fee. They don't get to say, you take Tuesday, I'll take Thursday. Because for them, there is no you, just me. Me and the baby. Me and the rent. Me and the calendar with no margin for error. And you know what makes me ache? That their reality, the full weight of it, gets pushed into the same category as someone who simply feels unsupported, even when support exists. It's not the same. And saying that doesn't diminish anyone's hardship. It just protects the meaning of a word that should mean something. Single mom is not a trend. It's not a caption for sympathy. It's not a badge you wear to win the hard-suffering Olympics. It's a lived experience, a long one, a lonely one, and too often, a silenced one. Because real single moms aren't the loudest in the room. They're not crafting narratives. They're surviving them. They don't always have time to post the hard parts because they're busy living through them in real time. And that's why this matters. When we let the term get diluted, when we hand it out. To anyone whose co-parent isn't posting cute family photos, we don't uplift women. We erase the ones who most need to be seen. Respect looks like naming things accurately. It looks like protecting space for the people who didn't get to share the load. It looks like saying, your story is real, your struggle is valid, but it's not the same as hers. And that's not division, that's precision. That's how we keep empathy honest. So, if we're going to talk about honoring single moms, let's do it for the ones who aren't just parenting alone. They're living alone in the responsibility. No backup, no buffer, no borrowed heroism, just grit and grace. And the quiet kind of strength no hashtag can hold. I didn't say what I said to tear anyone down. I said it because sometimes the truth gets so watered down, so dressed up in performance and pain, that we forget who's really carrying what. This isn't about comparing wounds. It's about protecting clarity, because clarity is kindness, even when it's uncomfortable. If we want to honor women, truly honor them, we have to start by naming things as they are, not as they're framed on social media, not as they're shaped to win sympathy, but as they show up day after day, in the lives of women who aren't just surviving silently, but have been doing it without applause, without backup, without the luxury of emotional absence arguments. So, no, you're not a bad person for asking a fair question. You're not heartless for noticing when a story doesn't quite match the facts. You're not anti-woman for holding space for nuance. You're just awake, and maybe a little tired of pretending not to be. Because what real solidarity needs now isn't more noise, it's more honesty. It's letting the word struggle mean something again. It's being brave enough to say, yes, I see you, and I also see her, and her weight is heavier. To every mother who's actually doing it alone, I see you. You shouldn't have to fight for that recognition, not against a hashtag, not against curated exhaustion. You deserve more than lip service. You deserve support. You deserve policy. You deserve community that doesn't just clap, but shows up. And to those who feel seen in this story, whether as the one who bit her tongue or the one who finally spoke, thank you for being here. Drop a comment below if you've ever been made to feel mean for being honest. Share this video with someone who's confused, silenced with strength for too long. And if you're building a life on truth, not titles, hit subscribe. Because here, we're not here to perform pain. We're here to tell it like it is, and make space for the women who live it.